Okay, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great privilege to welcome you all to the KI public event this morning. And I would like to express my deepest gratitude to President Schneider of KI for inviting us to this timely event. The year 2024 is quite an exceptional year. As you know, national elections in more than 60 countries in the world have already taken place or are scheduled, which altogether represent almost half global population. Among them, not to mention, the U.S. general election in this November carries tremendous implication for global dynamics, and its outcome will undoubtedly shape the future of international economic and political landscape. In this context, today's event will focus on the potential foreign policy implication of the U.S. presidential election on the U.S.-ROK alliance, particularly from a South Korean perspective. We are incredibly lucky to have a very splendid group of speakers with extensive policy knowledge and experience. Ambassador Chun Young-woo, former Senior Secretary to the President for Foreign Affairs and National Security, Ambassador An Ho-hyung, former Ambassador of Republic of Korea to the United States, and Professor Hong Young-po, the former Minister of Unification, and Dr. Ri Jung-min, former Ambassador of National Security Affairs, and Professor Lee Shin-hwa, former Ambassador for International Cooperation on the North Korea Human Rights. In fact, over the last 3 days, these speakers, along with other highly prominent US and Korean experts, had a very productive and fruitful discussions on the lead issue at the U.S. Korea Opinion Leaders Seminar, which is co-organized by KEI and the KIEP every year. Today, speakers will share their observation and hunches on the foreign policy agendas of two candidates, potential challenges and opportunities for the future of U.S.-Korea alliance, either in a Trump or Harris administration, and Korea's policy options for a more secure and comprehensive partnership. Taking a bipartisan recognition of Korea's strategic significance in the Indo-Pacific region, my personal take is that regardless of the outcome of the upcoming presidential election, the foundation of security and the economic cooperation between our two nations will be further strengthened in the coming years. And I am pretty much confident that today's discussion by our esteemed speakers will serve a springboard for deeper mutual understanding and for future engagement that will further strengthen our alliance and advance our shared goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Lee. I also just want to acknowledge, since this is my first event here, this wonderful space that Kathy Stevens and Mark Ticola were instrumental in designing. We're very fortunate to have it. I also just want to mention a couple of other things that we've been doing before we dive into the discussion. One, we just finished the Ambassadors Dialogue Program, where we took Ambassadors Cho Hyun-dong and Philip Goldberg to Michigan, Texas, and Arizona for a tour and public diplomacy engagements. And this is something that KEI has been doing for over 30 years, but it's actually the only program of its sort that combines ambassadors of a country with which the US has an alliance to do that kind of program. And so it is kind of our flagship program. I want to mention that. We also have an updated U.S. Korea Diplomatic Crossroads volume coming out next month, which includes a lot of firsthand accounts from ambassadors from both sides, ambassadors of the U.S. to South Korea and ambassadors of South Korea to the U.S. Ambassador An has a chapter in that volume, and it's really a magnificent resource, I think, for understanding and giving kind of a personal perspective on the relationship. And then lastly, I just want to mention that we have an event coming up featuring our 5th annual KEI YouGov polling that will be taking place on October 10th, and we'll be releasing a number of other things related to that poll, which was just conducted over the course of the last few weeks, and we're just processing the results. So stay tuned for that. Now, I do want to dive in. I thank President Lee for already providing introductions for everyone, so I can dispense with that. And really what I want to do is just to ask each individual a slightly different question in order to kind of get us started off, in order to help us to cover some ground, because we have limited time. And I'm very hopeful that we will have succinct and substantive responses. So I want to start with Ambassador Chun, and I want to ask you, you were National Security Advisor in the Lee Myung-bak administration, which was working with the Obama administration at that time. The relationship has gone through a lot since then, but what do you think are the major opportunities and points of conflict that President Yoon would face in the event of a Harris administration? What will the alliance manager's agenda and priorities be between a President Harris and a President Yoon?
Well, we know that Harris, if she's elected, will attach different kind of value to alliance than Trump. So I think this will be very encouraging for the management of alliance. I think her election will offer more opportunities for cooperation than, sources of conflict. That said, in terms of opportunities, I think there'll be one to consolidate ROK, U.S., Japan trilateral cooperation and make it irreversible, so that when there's change of administration in Seoul, it will become more difficult to reverse. So making it irreversible by consolidation and institutionalization, that will be very important. I think, President Yoon and, Harris can work together on that and make some progress. Another area I can think of is defense industry cooperation. You know that the U.S. has a severe shortage of shipbuilding capacity, and that's one of the reasons why the gap between U.S. and China in terms of number of ships, Navy ships, and tonnage is widening. So I think if U.S. is going to catch up with China, and I think U.S. can take advantage of excess shipbuilding capacity that Korea has. And we have also very important defense industries in conventional fields in other areas also where we can do better than the U.S. So I think there is an opportunity for close industrial cooperation and procurement cooperation between ROK and U.S. So they are the opportunities that come to my mind. For alliance management, I think the how to operationalize extended deterrence, that will continue to become a tricky issue between ROK and U.S. Korean side wants more explicit formulation, and they don't want ambiguity in U.S. deterrence commitment. For instance, the U.S., I think U.S. commitment to end the North Korean regime if North Korea uses nuclear weapons. I think that's the strongest possible commitment as possible, I think. But Koreans are not satisfied with this broad commitment. What the Korean side wants is automaticity of nuclear response to North Korea's nuclear use. And thus far, there have been many consultations, I think, at different levels between Korea and the U.S., but I think U.S. is still very reluctant to reduce ambiguity in their formulation. So what the U.S. Formulates in its commitment, like the U.S. will use a full range of assets available to them to retaliate against North Korea. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable statement, but what Korean side wants is, if North Korea uses nuclear weapons, then it should trigger automatic nuclear response. So I don't know whether U.S. can go that far. That will be an issue that we have to work out. Another one is, I think, on division of labor between Korea and the U.S. The Washington Declaration last year mentioned about Korea's conventional support to U.S. Nuclear operations conducted by Strategic Command. This is about operational division, but I think besides operational division, I think ROK should invest more in denial capabilities. As I said yesterday, well, this audience haven't heard my remarks yesterday. I'm sorry. So I think we should be prepared for deterrence failure. Thus far, I think ROK-US consultations focused on making extended deterrence more credible. I don't think that's enough, because deterrence against North Korea could fail when instability arises in North Korea.
I'm going to stop you there because you've already put a lot of issues into the new president's inbox, and I'm sure that you have no more, but we're going to get to those.
Okay.
But I want to switch over to what we anticipate the agenda to look like under a possible Trump administration. Ambassador An, I'm asking you this question precisely because you were ambassador here during the transition to the last Trump administration from the Obama administration. And so you have some firsthand experience with this. What do you anticipate the agenda to look like in the event that we have a Trump administration?
Well, Scott, I think in order to find the response to that question you just raised, I think we could be starting with an anecdote. And that anecdote is, when there is a presidential election, then ambassadors, all the ambassadors here in town, they in fact would be imposing certain list of homeworks upon themselves. And then in my case, one of the homeworks I imposed upon myself was, when there is a new president, then my president, President Park Geun-hye at the time, would wish to have telephone conversation with the new president as early as possible. How could I arrange that? That sounds not a huge issue, but at the same time, when you're an ambassador, that can be a huge issue. So there was a homework I imposed upon myself. And then I think on that account, I did pretty well, because the first foreign leader with whom President-elect Trump spoke with was Prime Minister Abe of Japan. And second foreign leader with whom President-elect Trump spoke with was President Park Geun-hye. So I think I did rather well. And I still remember the conversation between President Park and then President-elect Trump at the time. And President Park started out by saying why alliance is so important between Korea and the United States.
Just because I want you to tell us what President Yoon should be telling a President Trump.
Well, I'm moving to there.
Okay. I need to ask you to move a little bit more quickly then.
Right, okay. Yeah. And then President-elect Trump responded, very short, but at the same time, good enough answer. He said, well, Madam President, I agree with you 100%. 100%. That's what I recall President Trump said. And then where President Park Geun-hye began to talk about economic relations. And then President-elect Trump gave a little bit longer answer. He said, I understand very well that Korea, in fact, has a very strong manufacturing sector. So it was a little bit long answer. But moving on to what President Yoon's agenda would look like, well, I agree with Ambassador Chun when he says, well, in fact, given where we are in the alliance relationship between Korea and the United States, we should try to move on from general issues to more specific understandings. So in that respect, I wholeheartedly agree with Ambassador Chun when he says that, well, institutionalization, further institutionalization of our security relationship would be extremely helpful. One of the reasons being, it in fact would be significantly reducing the possibility of the relationship being reversed. And at the same time, still on the same page with the specification of treaty relationship between Korea and the United States, defense industry. I think Korea has a lot to offer with respect to defense industry. So I agree with Ambassador Chun. And then I just think about where we stand between Korea and United States, comparing back in 2016 and then now in 2024. And I think one area where we have moved much in those intervening 8 years is technology, cooperation in technology, AI, quantum computing, cyber, space, bio, where the cooperation between Korea and United States in technology has moved so much ahead in comparison with the way we were back in 2016. And then that's definitely area where we should be making further progress. And then I think the fourth area where we very much hope we could be making progress would be, well, something called global leadership for the United States. And if global leadership for the United States was important back in 2016, I would argue it is even more important today. Why? Because the challenges to global liberal order, in fact, has become far worse in comparison with 2016. So I think that will be the area where President Yoon should continue to work with new president in the United States.
Okay, and that is also a topic that I would think we want to come back to as well, the question of perceptions of U.S. global leadership. But before we do that, I want to switch to Minister Hong. Obviously, there's a lot of anticipation as related to whether or not President Trump would resume his bromance with Kim Jong-un. And so I'm interested in what you expect. But so far, we've seen no indication of a desire on the North Korean side to talk with the U.S. What is your expectation for what U.S. policy toward North Korea should look like in a next administration?
Yeah, for last 25 years or so, at least, ever since I entered academia, I have almost always attended kind of meetings discussing what will be the influence of U.S. election into the U.S.-North Korean relationships. And well, my answer has been always, there will be no significant change. And I think it was right. But this time, because of, as you know, because of the Trump factor, there are many predictions that the outcome of the election of the United States could bring a greater shift in U.S.-North Korean relations, especially if Trump is elected. And yes, well, according to the current policy directions of both sides, well, if Trump is elected, there is a higher possibility of dialogue between the United States and North Korea. But I believe there will be no significant difference in the outcome. This is because, as you know, North Korea seeks recognition as a nuclear armed state or nuclear weapon power. and no matter what or who becomes the U.S. president of the United States, he or she cannot break down or break the order of denuclearization or the NPT system in the international order. So I think, well, we can, in retrospect, Trump already had 2 summit meetings with Kim Jong-un. And in 2018 in Singapore, Trump and Kim Jong-un made an agreement on the broad principle of denuclearization. But in the Hanoi summit, the agreement was broke down. There was no agreement at all on the denuclearization because unlike the Singapore meeting in Hanoi, Trump president asked more concrete and detailed principle of denuclearization to Kim Jong-un. And Kim Jong-un could not provide any satisfactory response to Trump. So that resulted in the rupture of the meeting. So I think, well, in that kind of situation can be repeated, even if Trump is elected and Trump meet with Kim Jong-un again. And well, of course, Kim Jong-un want and eager to have kind of negotiation with the United States, with new administration. And we can surmise at the time, maybe North Korea declare for itself as a nuclear power. In retrospect, in 2017, November of 17, North Korea declared that it accomplished a nuclear capability. And they began to seek a way to have a negotiation with both South Korea and the United States. So this time again, if North Korea wants dialogue or negotiation with the United States, it declared itself as a nuclear power and asked the United States to have kind of the armament talks as a nuclear power, vis-a-vis nuclear power. No, but I don't think that will be successful, as I said earlier. Yeah, that's my.
Let me just ask one follow-up on that, because we've been seeing a lot of speculation based on NIS briefings to the National Assembly of a potential October surprise, but then now it seems like it's a November surprise. The question that I have for you is, what do you think that North Korea is trying to achieve in terms of setting the table for the next administration?
Well, the purpose is, as I said, to be recognized as a nuclear power and to at least reduce the sanctions against North Korea by the international society. And well, actually, the fundamental or the ultimate purpose of North Korea vis-a-vis the United States in this negotiation with the nuclear problems, the North Korean goal is to weaken the alliance between the U.S. and South Korea. And the final goal will be the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from the South Korean territory. So the South Korean government and President Yoon should be very cautious and have keen cooperation with the United States, with new administration, not to be weaken the kind of negotiation to weaken the South Korean security. Okay. This is very important.
Right. Thank you. And now, Shinhwa, you just stepped down from your position as ambassador focusing on North Korean human rights. But I also know that you've looked at the multilateral environment for such a long time at the UN. So I want to ask you what your expectations are for human rights policy in a next administration, but also what do you think are the challenges that the world is going to face with the United States that continues to be so politically divided?
Okay, thank you. Well, obviously there is a strong risk if Trump is re-elected that human rights issue would be sidelined in favor of political negotiation. And more worrisome is if he focus on arms reduction rather than denuclearization in order to seek short-term political trophy. I think that might ameliorate U.S.-North Korea relationship to some extent, but it would definitely strain U.S. Korea alliance, and also it would challenge South Korea's security so-called red line. So I think we have to make clear what could be or should be our red line toward the U.S. negotiation, Trump's negotiation with North Korea. And a Harris administration would most probably maintain focusing on human rights international norms. So like figure like Special Envoy Julie Turner, she's wonderful by the way, will focusing on North Korean human rights issues. But still, from my experience as an ambassador until last month, I sometimes found the frustration for South Korea's initiative, or like what kind of a central role the South Korea could and should do even for this human rights issues. Because even among like-minded countries, the international community struggled to present unitary or collective voices or approaches to deal with the issue related to North Korean human rights issues and other related to North Korean issues. So like denuclearization issue is a hard power agenda, which is largely driven by great power like the U.S. But human rights issue is not only because it's a soft power agenda, but also because the South Korea has the primary stakeholder. I think we should take some initiatives which was supported by the U.S. and allies. But oftentimes the U.S. is, again, take initiative roles and have a more media focus and etc. So hopefully my successor, I hope he or she will be appointed soon, can having a better circumstance to work for these divisions. And paralysis of UN Security Council, mainly due to the veto power from China and Russia, I think make it more important for U.S. and Korea relationship stronger and unitary to internationalize and globalize so-called North Korean questions, not only human rights issues, but nuclears and sanction issues or non-proliferation issues as well. So for that, I think it is very important for the President Yoon and the next U.S. President must develop comprehensive and holistic approach to integrate the security threat and human rights issues as two sides of the same coin. That's what I've been advocating for over the past couple of years. And at the same time have to thoroughly prepare for any contingencies in North Korea, since North Korea's domestic situation appears to be pretty unstable as well. Because as you know, in the event of the contingency, the situation of North Korea will further aggravate chaos and also suffering of the ordinary North Korean people. I wrote something about the multilateralism as well, but if you give another chance.
Okay. Thank you, Xinhua. And now, Chungmin, I want to ask you about your recent K-Power report from Carnegie. But what's interesting to me about the K-Power report is that it uses the phrase K-Power, but it seems like it's really also about peak Korea. And that raises a very interesting question for me because I don't think we've ever seen a time in the alliance cooperation where both the U.S. and South Korea would be cooperating in the context of diminishing relative influence. And so I'd like to ask you, what do you think are the potential new challenges that both leaders might face in a context where relative power of both sides is facing some constraints or challenges?
Well, thank you, Scott. And let me also say my sincere thanks to the president of KIEP and to KEI and for all the great staff to make this happen. You asked a really great question, and in the report that was released last month by Carnegie, my main point was twofold, that all the objective drivers that led Korea to become a de facto G10 country over the last 50 years, they're all in decline. We have the world's fastest super-aging society, 25% are over 65. Our growth, economic growth, will be between 1% and 2% over the next 20, 30 years. And South Korea faces ballooning social welfare costs. At the same time, you have exponentially increasing security threats. So with a lower tax base, how are you able to offset all these challenges? And to me, the reason is this is why you need a stronger alliance, because both the US and South Korea, as well as Japan for that matter, or even the EU, none of these critical so-called Western Bloc states are able to have the leverage that they did 20, 30 years ago. And if you look at what Trump's mantra is, the so-called Make America Great Again slogan that they all wear, as you know, my personal view is you cannot make MAGA a reality without critical allies. You look at shipping, as Ambassador Chun mentioned, and South Korea and Japan are the world's first and second most advanced shipbuilding countries on the planet. So you need those allies to make sure that they're able to help build US ships to counter rising Chinese naval power. On the AI wave, I would argue once again, South Korea ranks number 6 on AI innovation. And so if you are including the Koreans, the Taiwanese, the Japanese, that's another factor that makes, quote unquote, MAGA plus allies a very crucial factor. One final point is Trump is obsessed with North Korea and with China in a negative way and with Russia. But since June 2024, when Putin signed a new defense pact with Kim Jong-un, that places a very different burden on the US, regardless of whether it's Harris or Trump in the White House. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, even though Trump may believe he can end the Ukrainian war in 24 hours, that's never going to happen. He is going to face a very difficult and different strategic environment than he was president back in 2017. And one final word is, many Koreans are concerned that if Trump becomes president, yes, he will ask for more money on cost sharing. He may even pull out US troops or even allow South Korea to go down nuclear on its own. But I would argue that Kim Jong-un has made up his mind. As former Minister Hong Yong-pyo knows very well, North Korea now says South Korea is an eternal enemy, unification is off the table, and they will never negotiate nuclear weapons with anyone. And so under those conditions, 98% of Kim Jong-un's problems are twofold. They're domestic, and he also has enormously crucial health issues, which I believe will have national security ramifications both for the US and South Korea.
Okay. Thank you, Chung-min. So you're advocating for essentially a Make Alliance Great Again approach, regardless of who is in the next administration.
I don't have the bumper sticker, but the U.S. should be very, very, you look at the world.
We'll find a bumper sticker supplier for you.
Right? You look at the world, if you canvass the world, Scott, how many allies are there on the planet that has advanced manufacturing, big tech, AI, formidable militaries, critical superpower, soft power, and there is an abundance of Korean Americans who are really pro-alliance. And if you add all that up, if you don't use that to make America great again, I don't know why you have that slogan in the first place.
Okay. So I think the one issue that we really haven't dug into enough, I'm actually going to come back to Ambassador Ahn on this, because in the event of a Trump administration, it seems to me that the merchandise trade deficit and the question of the future of clean energy are two big issues that are potential points of challenge that the two governments would have to manage. And so I'd just like to ask you to address how you think the Yoon administration should go about handling those issues.
But I think more broadly speaking, it will be economic agenda between Korea and then the United States. Under either Harris government or Trump government. And then when it comes to trade, well, what we are observing today is, of course, we are observing resuscitation of economic vitality in the trade relationship between Korea and United States these days. So the trade volume alone, that in fact is surpassing the trade volume between Korea and China. So when it comes to the surplus, the size of the surplus, that of course we understand would be, well, getting a lot of attention of President Trump. But that in fact was an issue even during the time when I used to be the ambassador, because it used to be about $10 billion, which increased to $27 billion under my watch. And then I saw certain, well, yellow light on that respect. So we, in fact, could be taking various different measures to be addressing that issue. So what I'm saying is that it is not a new issue. But at the same time, what I was telling my American counterparts at the time was, let us just look at economic relationship between Korea and United States in a broader perspective. There is, of course, current account, but at the same time, there is investment account, and then there is service account, and then there is, well, defense industry cooperation. Putting them all together, it in fact is a more balanced relationship. So, well, challenges would be there when it comes to economic issues, and one of them would be, well, quite a new, say, energy approach in case Mr. Trump would be elected. But at the same time, given all those years of how we have been dealing with adjusting economic issues between Korea and then the United States, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to deal with them.
Okay, well, I'll respect your desire to keep your recommendations private to the Yoon administration. I want to, I have a long list of additional questions, but I want to give our audience an opportunity to get into the discussion. And so I just want to pause here and see if there's anybody who has a question they want to raise in the time that we have. Please introduce yourself and make your question brief.
Great. So my name is Terrence Matsuo. I'm a non-resident fellow here at KEI. And so one of the things the panel has spoken about is the need to institutionalize defense cooperations that, U.S., Japan, and Korea have made under the Biden administration. And so I was wondering if the panel could kind of expand on what specific actions they see that could kind of ensure that these types of developments aren't rolled back by political changes in either Washington, Tokyo, or Seoul, two of which are seeing elections this year, and we don't know how they're going to turn out. Thank you.
Okay, Chung-Min?
Just very briefly, that's a great question, I think. I would argue that we are now facing in Northeast Asia what I would call a hyper-OODA loop, because the early warning is so shortened by the fact that you have hypersonic missiles, laser-guided missiles, you have drones, and the list goes on. And as long as China and the DPRK are able to ramp up their ballistic missile threats to Japan and South Korea, as the three defense ministers met in Tokyo, as you know, for the first time in Japan, they agreed that there will be a so-called trilateral security cooperation mechanism. And I hope that that survives whoever becomes president in November here in the US, or for that matter, a new prime minister in Japan after Prime Minister Kishida. The second point is, as I said earlier, that we have to really look at the fact that North Korea's nuclear weapons are becoming much more sophisticated. If they're able to put nuclear warheads on SLBMs, that is going to be a critical tipping point moment for the South Korean and Japanese Navy. So in that sense, advanced ISR capabilities and intel sharing between the US, Japan, and Korea, I would argue, has never been more important. And so as soon as Harris or Trump wins, I believe the first thing that our allies must do is to give Washington a briefing on really making sure that the ISR becomes much stronger than it is today.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in? If not, we'll go to James Kim, first row.
Hi, thank you. James Kim, KI. My questions to, in particular, I think Ambassador Chun and Ambassador An, because they've watched this firsthand, close proximity. Looking back at the Trump administration's personal chemistry with President Moon is interesting. It turned out pretty okay in my view. Chemistry between President Yoon and President Biden seems to be quite good as well. Do you see any chance here for problems with personal chemistry, depending on who gets elected, or is that going to be relatively okay? You kind of hinted that President Trump seems to be a very personable kind of guy, even though he talks tough on the alliance relationship.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how. Well, they have to.
Well, you've seen it from President Obama.
Yeah. Well, between President Obama and Lee Myung-bak, it was excellent. And that enabled us to resolve many problems that would have been very difficult to resolve if the personal relationship was bad. Between Harris and Yoon, I cannot tell because a nice guy, two nice guys don't make good chemistry all the time. So they are, I think, very decent people, but, and the reason that President Moon and Trump had very good, I don't think they had a very good personal chemistry, but they had a common goals, engaging North Korea on North Korean terms. On that point, they had a meeting of mind. So they had every reason to pretend to have good chemistry, but I'm not sure if they had a real good chemistry. I think it's more likely for President Yoon to have chemistry with Trump. He knows what it would take, to befriend Trump. But I think it's my just personal guess. I think it would be more difficult to get along with Harris, even if they share same interests, same priorities in alliance management. It's different. Trump will pursue policies that President Yoon may feel uncomfortable, but personal chemistry is different thing.
Scott, if I could add a rejoinder, I disagree a little bit with Ambassador Chun, simply because both President Yoon and Vice President Harris are former prosecutors. So they bring that common legal, I think it's very important. If you look at,
Prosecutors don't get along very well.
well, that's not
That's
really
the problem.
true.
That's what worries me.
Well, they don't get along well with people who commit crimes. But as the same prosecutors, I think there is a lot of shared ground. And I think that's very important because both President Yoon and VP Harris, they spent a large chunk of their lives before they entered politics when they were in the legal profession. So that's one commonality. The second I would argue is, I think they're both very rational people. And if you look at all the issues that Shin-Hwan mentioned, multilaterally and bilaterally and trilaterally that needs to be fixed, I think Yoon and Harris will have as good a relationship than with Trump and Yoon. Well, who knows?
Yeah. Irrational people have a good chemistry with
Personal chemistry, they said Trump doesn't drink and Yoon doesn't play the golf. But we just figured it out. Yoon plays the golf, but because his busy schedule, he won't be able to play some time, right? So if Yoon somehow try to play a golf with Trump, I think that will be the one of the beginning. They can break the ice. But whatever it is, I think personal chemistry is important. But I think what kind of agenda, common agenda they can set matters much more than anything else.
Well, the reason why James was raising the question to me is because, in fact, I was there. I mean, when Jane was inaugurated the president, and I was an ambassador here in town. And I think that is the reason why James raised that question with me. And then maybe I could be adding one anecdote. which well, other panelists cannot share with you. Well, Mr. Moon was inaugurated as president in early May 2017. And the instruction I got from Seoul was try to arrange the visit of President Moon to Washington, D.C. as early as possible. Then I could arrange it late in June, which was June 28th. And then in the process of arranging it, very high-ranking government official of U.S. government, well, confessed to me, well, I understand why Seoul wants early meeting, and then of course we will arrange it, but at the same time, we wonder if that's a good idea. I mean, that in fact was a comment coming from very high-ranking government official. I wouldn't say who it was. And then he said, well, I just think about President Trump, I just think about President Moon. They in fact have very different background. And then telling from such a different background, I just wonder if they don't need time to be learning a little bit more about each other. So that was the comment coming from him. And I responded by telling him, well, I think personality is important, but at the same time, I think they in fact would be, in a sense, motivated by the same goal, which is how to further develop relationship between Korea and United States. When President Trump was early in his government, and then Mr. Moon is very early in his government, so it will be a common motivation for them how to further develop their relationship. Secondly, admitting what you said in the sense that, well, they have very different backgrounds. Don't you have a saying in the United States, which is that the opposite attract each other? So that in fact is how I overcame that reservation coming from that high-ranking government official, and then we could arrange it. And then all the rest is history.
We need a psychic reader to find out, you know.
So we have only
comparable.
time for one more question. I have two hands. I have a lot of hands. Let me go to the front here. I'm sorry, to the two people who I was unable to select.
Thank you. I'm Joshua Park from George Mason University, and thank you for presence tonight of organize this wonderful gathering and meeting. My question is specifically to cooperation between U.S. and Korea with respect to defense industry. Then my question directly to Dr. Lee. Then if President Trump would be elected, is it possible to go further, proceed with respect to South Korean U.S. defense industry? Because as we know, that President Trump will go to America first. That will emphasize with respect to economic area. Then do you believe that even if Mr. Trump will be elected, cooperation with respect to defense industry will go further? If so, why? Thank you.
I think it will continue for two reasons. Number one, the war in Ukraine is not going to end tomorrow. And so if you look at what Europe needs or what NATO needs, one of the countries that are able to supply ammunitions and so forth, indirectly, of course, to our allies in NATO is basically the ROK. That also helps the American agenda. The second issue is shipbuilding. If you look at the Chinese ability to build naval ships and submarines versus the Americans, the gap is almost irreversible. And the only way you can do that is to make sure that you change the Jones Act and allow allied companies to service or build U.S. ships. Hanwha has just gotten a small U.S. Shipyard called Philly Shipyard. They have an MRO working with the U.S. Navy. And I believe that Mr. Trump will be able to see that as a step forward because it is an investment into the U.S. and creating jobs at U.S. shipyards. That's only good for the U.S. economy. And so if more Korean companies come into the U.S. to help U.S. ships, I think Mr. Trump will be very happy.
I do think that will be a very interesting area to watch. And I want to ask one last question to all of our panelists to conclude the session, and that is, if President Yoon has the opportunity to visit either a President Trump or a President Harris, in the White House next year, what song should he prepare to sing? And we'll start with you.
Well, I don't think he will have an opportunity to sing because he can sing only in a state banquet, which is, not. I think the same president will not have a second opportunity for a state visit. Only state visit will allow time to sing a song in a banquet. A dinner is usually reserved for state visitors, not for just official visitors. So unfortunately, I think
I feel like you're dodging my questions.
he will not have opportunity. to
Okay,
sing.
okay, Ambassador On.
Well, I think we are talking about hypothetical situation.
Yes.
And then in the hypothetical situation, my recommendation to President Yoon would be, you raise me up. And then the reason why I'd be recommending that would be, there is a verse which I really like in that song, which is, you make me larger than who I am. And I think that is something we need between Korea and the United States, in the sense that we are allies, we are going through very turbulent times. And then when we work together, we can be larger than who we are. So that's the reason why I should be recommending this song.
Okay, nice. Mr. Hong?
Yeah, well, when I get that question, I first try to surmise why President Yoon sang the American Pie last year. I think the first is that song was quite popular, was not only in America but also in South Korea. And well, President Yoon is a little bit older than me, but when I was in the middle school or high school, we listened to various American pop songs, including Vincent, and American Pie. I know also that song. So first is popular, and actually Yoon like and sing frequently when drink, especially. And the second reason is that the song symbolizes the American culture tradition, and it can show the Americans that I know very well the America, and I like the American and cultural tradition. So, well, in that context, I tried to realize, well, first of all, what is another singer or song which is very popular and has a song that is easy to sing and also very American. So I want to recommend Billy Joel. Well, I like Billy Joel. Well, there are some songs about like Piano Man and the New York State of My Mind, but I think the most easy song and kind of have meaning is the Honesty. So I hope with some honesty that can both U.S. and South Korea have credible and trustworthy relationships. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay, Xinhua?
Chance is very unlikely because when last time he sang here, the Korean public opinion wasn't that good. But still, if he got a chance, I'm sure whatever he is doing, it reflects the U.S. personal leadership style, as well as the Korea and China, the U.S. Shared values at the country state level. I think he's going to consider both. So for Trump, given his kind of a victory-oriented and very confident style, maybe we are the champion, my friends. And for Harris, since she represents for global harmony and diversity and democracy values, maybe John Lennon's Imagine might be one of the things he can consider. But I think he has to make sure before he sings, the U.S. president should sing a Korean song.
That's for our next program, actually.
If Harris wins, I think what President Yoon should do is sing together with her, We Make the World, or We Are the World. And if Trump wins, what I think they should do is do a duet on either Frank Sinatra's My Way or the Beatles' Let It Be. So those are my song choices for both Trump and Harris.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chungmin. Actually, our internal office pool was going with my way, so somebody has mentioned that. So we're going to conclude. I want to just thank each of you for taking time from your schedules to participate in OLS and also to come and be a part of our of my first program, public program here at KEI. I want to thank our audience for coming, and also I'd like to ask the audience to thank our panelists for their contributions with a round of applause. Thank you very much. Stay tuned for coming attractions.